Okay, so this time we're gonna look, as announced beforehand, at a few more functions, those mini programs already in Python that can be used to manipulate, or in this case, get information from string variables. Now, last time we looked at how slicing and positioning works in Python, with the zeros starting at 0, the last with the semicolons, etc. I'm sure you remember, otherwise you can just go back and watch the video. And this time we're going to start off in a brand new shell. We're just going to restart the shell, get it all cleaned up, reset our variables, well, actually delete all the existing variables, and start off fresh. Now, let us create another variable. Let's just call it x again, because we like calling variables x, and we'll call it Mr. Last. Okay. What can we do? Well, first of all, we're gonna try and look at 3 different functions in this video. The index function, which gives you the position, remember, position, of a certain symbol, in this case letter, in a string. The find function, which A tells you whether the letter exists, and B also gives you the position. And the count function, which tells you how often a certain letter exists in a string. Which is why we're actually going to change the variable name, because I just noticed none of the letters in this are there twice, which would be kind of boring. Let's just go back to hello world. So here we see we just override the variable. Let's see, did it work? Yeah, okay, of course it worked, but just to make sure, hello world, back to our good old hello world. So let us begin by, let's say, counting the number of L's in hello world. Now, by my count, there's 3 of them. But since pre-programmers are very lazy people, we're gonna get a function to do the counting for us, which of course is quite useful if you have a lot longer strings. Now, we call this function through the already beforehand used dot notation. Remember here, variable name dot function name brackets with parameters. Now this we again want to change, or not change, but want to get information about the variable x. So x dot and the name of the function, which, believe it or not, is count. We add the brackets, and this time we do need a parameter, because we need to tell the function, the program, the count function, what to count in the variable x. We're going to tell it to count L. Oops. Now, please do note that I'm putting the L in quotation marks to make it a string, because it looks for the string type symbol L. If I'd only put an L in here, it'd be like, there's no variable called L, because without this, it wouldn't detect the L as a string, but as a variable, like the X is detected here. So we press enter, and there we go, 3. And yep, so Python and I, we agree there's 3 L's in hello world. This, on a small scale, seems pretty useless, but if you have long, for example, patterns, or like weird codes, or long Word documents, and for some obscure reason you really want to know how many full stops you used, this is the way to find out. From this, I'd say we go on to the index function, which works by dot notation as well, x dot. Guess what it's called? Index. And our brackets, and this time, once more, we need a parameter, because we want the index function to return us the position of a certain symbol, which we want to give the function, otherwise it doesn't know what to return. So, the position, let us find the position of W. Here we go. Enter, and 6. Now, remember, in Python, we start counting with positions at 0. So, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And, space bars, spaces, they also count. So, it's working pretty well. Now we know the position of W. Now, I'll show you what the find function does, and then I'll explain why it's different from the index function, because it seems kind of like the same thing. Once more, dot notation, x dot find, name of variable, dot name of functions, bracket parentheses. We want to find the w, and it gives us a 6. Well, yeah, we already had that from the index function. 6 is still the position. Now, the difference between the index and the find function is the following. If I go x dot index and look for, what are we going to look for? Let's look for a q in there. Oh, we get an error. And of course, we really do not like it as programmers if there's an error in the script, because like in Python, like with all other programming languages, errors in your script will immediately crash the program unless you handle them, but that's a later story. Now let us compare this with what happens if we use the find. X dot find, and let us find a q. No error, that's good, and a -1. Now the -1 doesn't give you a position. -1 is an indicator that q does not exist. This is really useful to avoid errors occurring when you're looking for letters, because if you try to find the position of a letter through the index function and it doesn't exist, your program is going to crash. Using the find function allows you to check whether it exists and allows you to get the index straight away. So one could, I guess, say that the find function is a superior or better version of the index function. Although when handling with lists and dictionaries and tuples, which are all stuff for the future, the index function has a few more very unique aspects which make it valuable again. Now, just to recap the entire section about manipulating strings and using these functions, there's basically a few important things to keep in mind. First of all, the dot notation. Dot notation is an essential part of any programming language. In Python, we start by giving the name of the variable. This could be y, z, whatever we created the variable as. Put a dot, and then write the name of the function we're calling, and in brackets any arguments that the function needs, or any what were they called? Any parameters that the function needs. Now, secondly, the positioning stuff. Although seemingly rather useless, knowing how to slice and get certain parts, or get positions, or understand positions like the ones we got here, is extremely important when programming, especially later on when you work with very large lists or larger string variables. It's going to come in very handy and going to save you a lot of work and a lot of trouble going back and changing all these brackets, changing all these numbers because you forgot that Python starts counting at 0. Lastly, it is important to note that by simply calling these index dot notation functions, we're not actually changing the variable. If you remember, 2 videos ago, I believe, this didn't actually change the variable. All it did was return an image or a reflection of the variable changed in a certain way, but the variable, the x in itself, stayed the same. If we want to actually change the variable, we have to override it, writing x is equal to x dot lower, which is now, because now x is obviously equal to x dot lower. This is a very important point, and again, it's going to save you a lot of trouble in the future. For now, this is going to be all on strings, and the next thing we're going to be looking at is numbers, and how to use numbers to make a simple calculator to then get input information from the user to allow the user to do simple calculations in a program without having to mess around with this Python shell and everything, so that they can just double click it like a program and write in the numbers and get answers. Okay.